Welcome to this deep dive. We've got a really interesting set of articles and notes here, and they all have to do with AI, but not just the exciting side of AI. We're going to dive into the reasons why so many big AI projects completely fail. So let's figure out what's really going on. And even more importantly, how can you make sure that your AI dreams don't turn into AI disasters?
Yeah, it's a bit of a paradox, right? I mean, on the one hand, you've got McKinsey predicting this huge $13 trillion impact on the global economy, and Gartner saying AI could boost decision making by like 25%.
Yeah.
But
It's
then,
almost like you're cruising along towards innovation. You step on a banana peel and bam, you faceplant. MIT, Gartner again, and even the Harvard Business Review are all reporting that a lot of companies are failing miserably with AI. Some reports even say that up to 85% of AI projects are leading to the wrong outcomes. What's the deal?
well, that disconnect between what AI could do and what's actually happening, that's a pretty big deal. And the source material we're looking at today actually calls this the objective gap. It really comes down to a few key things.
Okay, so let's talk about this objective gap for a second. How bad is this AI failure situation really?
Well, let's start with the potential. McKinsey's estimate a $13 trillion boost to the global economy by 2030, that's mind-blowing. And Gartner's prediction that AI could make decisions 25% better, I mean, that's a game changer for any business. But the reality is a lot different. The MIT Sloan Management Review, just last year, found that 78% of companies aren't seeing much value from their AI projects at all. And Gartner, they say by 2025, 85% of AI projects will actually give the wrong answers because of stuff like biased data or objectives that just don't line up with what the business really needs.
85%. That's like throwing darts blindfolded and hoping to hit the bullseye. And this isn't just a few companies here and there either. The Harvard Business Review says big companies are only seeing about a third of the value that they expected from AI, and the Boston Consulting Group found that 70% of companies basically are seeing zero impact from their AI projects. This is like an epidemic.
You're exactly right. This is a widespread problem. It's a systemic issue that companies across industries are struggling with. I mean, the potential is definitely there, but clearly something's going wrong, and that's what we need to figure out today.
So companies aren't trying to fail, right? There's got to be a reason why they're falling into this objective gap. What's really going on here?
There are a lot of things happening all at once, and often they all come together to create this perfect storm of AI project failure. But one of the biggest culprits is what we call technology first thinking.
Okay, break that down for us. Technology first thinking. What does that even mean when we're talking about AI?
Basically, it means companies get so caught up in the hype, the possibilities, all the buzzwords you hear, just the cool factor of AI that they jump in without really thinking it through. They don't even know what problem they're actually trying to solve. It's like buying the newest smartphone just because it's shiny and new without even thinking about if you need it or how you'll actually use it.
Oh, I am so guilty of that with like kitchen gadgets. So how does this translate to these big companies with their AI projects?
Think about all the chatbots a few years ago, right? Everybody and their brother was rushing to get a chatbot set up, sometimes just because everyone else was doing it. They weren't stopping to ask if a chatbot was even the right tool for their customer service or if their data was even good enough to train a chatbot properly. And the result was a lot of frustrated customers and wasted time and money. A totally failed project. That's technology first thinking gone wrong.
Ouch. Yeah, I can see how that would happen. But there's got to be more to it than just getting caught up in the excitement, right?
You're absolutely right. Another thing that trips companies up is something we call the complexity shield. AI is complex, and sometimes that complexity is used as a way to avoid those tough questions and the kind of accountability that you would have in other business projects.
So wait, you're saying people are using AI's complexity to avoid being held accountable?
Yeah,
That's pretty sneaky.
it's usually not that intentional. Imagine a project with all this technical jargon and super complicated algorithms. It's hard for people who aren't technical to ask the right questions or even figure out how to measure success. And this can create this weird situation where AI projects get a free pass even if they're not showing any real results.
Ah, so it's almost like a smokescreen. It's AI. It must be valuable, even if no one can really explain what it's doing or how it's helping.
You've got it. And that kind of thinking can lead to some dangerous assumptions. Instead of asking the tough questions like, is AI even the right tool for this problem? Or is it going to be worth the money? Or what are the risks involved? They just assume it's all going to be great because it's AI.
Okay, so we've got the hype factor and this complexity shield working against us. What other AI traps should we be watching out for?
Well, there's this really interesting thing that we see sometimes, and we call it fear of constraint. It sounds kind of backwards, but sometimes companies are afraid to set really specific goals for their AI projects because they don't want to miss out on some unexpected opportunity.
Hold on, that doesn't make sense. Wouldn't you want to have a clear goal? It's like setting out on a road trip with no destination in mind. You might see some cool things along the way, but you're probably going to end up lost.
I know, right? But there's this fear that if you narrow your focus too much, you might miss out on some amazing thing that AI could discover.
Right.
Like, let's say you want to use AI to help keep your customers coming back, but then you start worrying that by focusing on that, you're going to miss out on some totally new product idea that the AI could stumble on. I get the whole fear of missing out thing, but that's like saying I want to build a house, but I don't want to limit myself with blueprints. At some point, you need a plan, right?
Exactly. And without a clear plan, you're way more likely to end up with chaos than anything actually useful.
Okay, so we've got the hype, we've got the complexity shield, we've got fear of constraint. What's the final blow that sends these poor AI projects to their doom?
It often boils down to something we've all seen before. Good old-fashioned silos in organizations. You've got the data science team off in their corner, totally disconnected from the business teams who are actually supposed to use the stuff they're building.
So the classic case of the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing. I bet you've got research to back that up, don't you?
Of course I do. Remember that Harvard Business Review analysis we talked about? They found that companies with successful AI implementations had their business leaders and technical leaders spending 3 times as much time planning together compared to the companies that were failing. That collaboration is key.
Yeah, it's like building a bridge. You
Mhm.
need both sides working together, talking to each other, making sure they're building toward the same thing. Otherwise, you just end up with two halves of a bridge that don't connect.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've got a pretty clear picture of why so many AI projects go off the rails. They get swept up in the hype, they hide behind the complexity, they're afraid to be too specific, and then everyone just works in isolation. Not exactly a recipe for success. But before we get to solutions, I want to talk about the fallout for a minute. What happens when an AI project crashes and burns? What are the consequences?
The consequences can be pretty serious, and they can affect the whole company.
Okay, so give us the worst case scenario. What are the real dangers here?
The most obvious consequence is that companies end up trying to solve the wrong problem. They might focus on something that's really interesting technically, but it doesn't actually help the business in any meaningful way. Or they might even try to use AI to solve a problem that already has a much simpler solution that's been around forever.
So like using a chainsaw to cut butter.
Yeah.
Kind of overkill.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of resources. Without clear goals, companies might end up spending way too much on some fancy AI solution for a problem that could have been solved with a simple spreadsheet. Or they might not put enough resources behind the projects that actually really matter.
So it's not just about wasting money on the wrong tech, but also about missing opportunities to invest in things that could really make a difference. What about data? How do unclear objectives affect the data side of things?
Data becomes a nightmare. Companies end up gathering data without knowing why they're doing it. They miss important information or they ignore data quality issues. All of these things can derail an AI project before it even really got started.
It's like trying to bake a cake without a recipe. You might have all the ingredients, but if you don't have a plan, you're just going to end up with a big mess.
That is the perfect analogy. And even if you manage to get past the data problems, you're probably going to hit a wall when you try to implement your AI solution. Without a clear goal in mind, it's almost impossible to design something that fits into people's workflow or that people actually want to use.
Right, so you end up with this expensive AI system that nobody knows how to use or why they should even bother.
It happens all the time, unfortunately. And maybe the worst consequence of all of this is that you can't even tell if your AI project was successful. If you didn't have clear objectives from the beginning, how can you even measure your return on investment? How can you know what to do better next time?
Yeah, you're right. It all comes back to those objectives. If you don't know where you're going, how do you know if you've gotten there?
So basically, failing to define clear objectives is just setting yourself up for failure. You waste money, miss opportunities, and end up with a lot of frustration.
Exactly. It's a really important piece that a lot of companies are overlooking. All right, enough of the doom and gloom. Let's switch gears and talk about solutions. How do companies escape this cycle of AI failure and actually achieve those results that everyone keeps talking about?
That's where the strategic AI objectives framework comes in. This framework gives companies a roadmap to bridge that objective gap and actually start seeing success with their AI.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me about this framework. What's the magic formula?
It's not so much a magic formula as it is a structured approach, and it has 7 interconnected elements. It all starts with what we call strategic alignment. That means making sure that every single AI project is tied directly to your business goals, the big picture. You have to figure out which of those big strategic goals AI can actually help you achieve.
So before you even start thinking about algorithms and data, you need to step back and ask, what are we trying to accomplish as a business? And how can AI help us get there?
Exactly. It's about being strategic with AI, not just throwing technology at a problem. And this framework helps you do just that.
I like it. What's next?
The next element is problem definition. It might seem obvious, but it's really important to articulate the business challenge that you're trying to solve with as much precision as possible. And this is where you need input from both sides, the technical people and the business people, to get it right.
So we're not just saying we need to increase sales, we're figuring out why sales are lagging and how AI can address those specific root causes.
Exactly. You analyze the current situation, understand the root causes, and then figure out where AI can actually make a difference.
Okay, so we've aligned our AI plans with our business goals, and we've defined the problem really carefully. What's the next step in this magical framework?
Next comes specifying the success criteria. This is where you define what good looks like for this project in a way that you can measure.
So instead of saying we want to increase sales, we're saying we want to increase sales by 15% within the next quarter. We're setting a target, right?
Exactly. You need clear metrics for success, both for what the business is trying to achieve and how well the AI is performing. This means defining KPIs, setting goals for accuracy, and deciding how fast and how big your AI solution needs to be. It's all about painting a clear picture of success so you can track your progress and make changes along the way.
And I'm guessing that includes figuring out how people will actually use the AI. Because even the most brilliant AI system is useless if nobody actually uses it.
You're absolutely right. You need to think about how you'll measure things like user engagement and satisfaction, and what kind of impact this new AI system will have on the ways people are already working.
So we're moving from vague hopes and dreams to a much more concrete and actionable plan. What's the next piece of the puzzle?
The fourth element is all about measuring value. This goes beyond just tracking the numbers. It's about figuring out how your AI's performance actually translates into financial results.
So we're talking about ROI here. It's not enough to say our AI is 95% accurate. We need to show how that accuracy translates into dollars and cents for the business.
Exactly. This is where you build a framework that directly links AI performance to the key financial drivers for the business. You have to answer the question, how is this AI system actually affecting our bottom line?
I bet this is especially important when you're trying to get buy-in from the higher-ups, right? They want to see that their investment in AI is actually paying off.
You bet. And that brings us to the next really important element, accountability.
Okay, so it's not enough to just measure the AI system. We also have to hold people responsible for the results. We can't just build it and hope for the best.
Right. You need a clear structure that says who owns what and how it'll be measured. And this usually involves having a team with both technical people and business people so that everyone is working toward the same goals and everyone understands what success looks like.
That's like that bridge analogy again, right? You need both sides working together and being accountable for making sure that the bridge actually gets built.
Exactly. And this team needs the authority to make decisions. They need to be tracking the same metrics, and they need to have a good system for communicating and reporting back to everyone.
All right, so we've got strategic alignment, problem definition, success criteria, value measurement, and accountability. That's a lot. What's the next step on this roadmap to AI success?
Next comes planning the journey, the implementation roadmap. Here, you create a clear phased approach to actually bringing your AI solution to life.
So instead of trying to do everything at once, we're breaking the project down into smaller, manageable steps, right?
Exactly. You define what's absolutely essential to get started, prioritize those quick wins that show value early on, and build in feedback loops so you're constantly learning and adapting as you go.
I like that idea of delivering value in stages. It feels less risky, and it lets you show progress along the way, keep everyone motivated.
Right. And it helps to manage expectations and keep everyone focused on the end goal.
Okay, we're getting close to the finish line here. What's the final element in this framework?
The last, and arguably the most important element, is adaptation. You're not just setting a plan in motion and crossing your fingers. You're building in the ability to learn and make adjustments as you go.
So we're acknowledging that things are going to change, unexpected challenges will pop up, and we need to be ready to roll with the punches.
You got it. This means building in systems to collect feedback analyze the results, and even make changes to the project's scope, timeline, or even how you define success based on what you learn.
So it's like having a built-in feedback loop that lets you constantly adjust your course and make the most of your AI efforts over time. So instead of being rigid, we're being flexible and responsive.
Exactly. You need to be able to see when things aren't working and understand why, and then make changes to get back on track. And this isn't just about fixing problems, it's about gathering insights, sharing what you learn, and constantly improving the way you implement AI in your organization.
All right, so we've covered all 7 elements of this framework. That was a lot of information, but I'm starting to see how it could really help companies avoid those common AI pitfalls we talk about. It's like a blueprint for building successful AI solutions.
Exactly. It's a structured, comprehensive approach that takes you all the way from the initial strategy to continuous improvement. But, of course, even the best blueprint needs skilled builders.
So that brings us to the next big question. How do we actually implement this framework? Where do we even begin?
It might seem daunting, but breaking it down into phases is key. And I like to think of it as a 3-phase process. First, the assessment and reset phase, which takes about 60 days to really get right.
Okay, let's dig into that. What happens during those crucial first 60 days?
Those first 60 days are all about taking stock of where you are with AI right now and hitting the reset button. You need to look at all of your current AI projects and honestly evaluate them against your strategic priorities for the business. And this is the time to make some tough decisions. Which projects stay, which ones get adjusted, and which ones get the X.
So it's like spring cleaning for your AI portfolio. We're getting rid of the clutter, the projects that aren't really working for us, to make space for the ones that have real potential. That makes sense, but what comes next?
While you're doing this initial cleanup, it's also a good idea to pick a couple of those quick win projects. These are the projects that aren't too complex but can show some real value quickly. That way you can create some momentum early on and show everyone that this framework actually delivers results.
Proof of concept. It's like giving everyone a taste of success before we dive into the deeper work. Smart.
And one more thing you want to do in these first 60 days, start getting buy-in from the leadership team. Make sure they understand how the framework works, why it's so important, and what resources you're going to need to make it happen. You don't want to get too far down the road without the people who control the budget being on board, right?
Solid advice. So those first 60 days are about taking stock, getting rid of the projects that aren't working, and laying the groundwork for what comes next.
Yeah.
What's the next phase?
Days 61 to 120 are all about foundation building. This is where you take all of the information that you've gathered in that first phase and start putting the framework into practice. It's construction time.
Okay, I love that analogy. How do we start building this AI foundation?
The first thing you need to do is develop a common language and a set of tools for defining and tracking your AI objectives. Think about using standardized templates, agreeing on specific processes, and making sure everyone is using the same terminology. Basically, you want everyone in the organization speaking the same AI language.
So we're creating a universal translator for AI that should make communication a whole lot easier. What else is part of building this foundation?
Next, it's time to look at your teams. We talked about breaking down those silos, so this is where you start changing the structure of your teams to create that cross-functional accountability that we talked about. Make sure every AI project has a team with both technical experts and business people working together toward a shared goal.
It's like that bridge analogy again, right? Both sides have to be working together if you want the bridge to actually get built.
Exactly. So you've got the framework itself, you've got the right team in place. What's the next thing we need to think about?
Well, if we're trying to be really data-driven about this whole process, I'm guessing we need a way to actually measure what's happening.
You got it. The next step is to design your measurement system. This means developing really consistent ways to track the value and impact of your AI projects.
Okay, so this is where we build the tools and the dashboards that show us whether our AI investments are actually paying off. We're proving the return on investment.
Exactly. And the final piece of the foundation is to create a structure for governance. This might mean forming an executive steering committee or something similar that oversees all of your AI projects. They're the ones who will make decisions about resources and make sure that everyone is using the framework the right way.
So they're like the quality control team, making sure that we're building things to code and that we're not cutting any corners. That sounds like a pretty solid foundation. So we've assessed our current AI situation. We've gotten rid of the things that aren't working. We've built a strong foundation. How do we start scaling up from here?
The final phase, which we call scaling and refinement, is where the real magic starts to happen. This usually takes place over 6 to 12 months. And this is where you take everything you've learned so far, all the progress you've made, and you start applying it to all of your new AI projects. AI becomes just a normal part of how you do business.
So it's like graduating from building model airplanes to constructing a full-size jet. We're going big, but hopefully we're doing it responsibly. What does responsible scaling look like when it comes to AI?
Definitely responsibly. In this phase, you really focus on creating a system where your organization is constantly learning about AI. And that means setting up ways to collect feedback from your users, the stakeholders, and even watching what's happening in the market, keeping an eye on trends. You take all of that information, analyze it to find patterns and identify areas where you can do things even better. And then you use those insights to fine-tune all of your AI systems and processes.
So we're not just building AI systems, we're building a system that's constantly learning and evolving around those AI systems. It's all about staying flexible and adapting to a world that's constantly changing.
That's it. And a big part of that is having what we call an adjustment framework. This is a set of rules and guidelines that you can use to make smart decisions about when and how to make changes to your AI projects as you learn new things. It's not about reacting to every little bump in the road. It's about having a strategic approach to evaluating the situation, seeing what's working, and making those adjustments over time.
So we're being strategic and thoughtful instead of just reacting emotionally.
Exactly. That might mean making changes to the scope of the project, moving resources around, adjusting the timeline, or even redefining what success looks like. You have to be willing to adapt based on what you're learning.
Being flexible is so important. And all of this learning is great, but if it just stays within the team that's working on that specific project, it's not really doing much good for the rest of the organization, right?
You're absolutely right. That's why knowledge transfer is such a crucial piece of this scaling phase. It's not enough for individual teams to learn from their own experiences. You need to make sure that those lessons learned get shared with everyone in the organization so that everyone can benefit.
Knowledge is power, and sharing is caring. How do we actually make that happen, though? How do we make sure that the lessons learned from one AI project get shared effectively with the rest of the company?
There are a few key things you can do. First, make sure you document everything. Capture those lessons learned, both the big wins and the little mistakes, and create a central place where everyone can access that information. Second, create opportunities for people to connect and share their experiences. Communities of practice where people can swap stories and advice are really valuable. And finally, develop training programs to teach best practices and help everyone in the organization get better at working with AI.
So we're creating a company-wide AI brain trust. I love that.
That's the idea. By combining a clear framework with a dedicated team, integrated processes, a shared language, and strong executive support, you're setting your organization up to truly harness the power of AI in a way that's effective, responsible, and sustainable.
This is all starting to make so much sense, but I'll be honest, it still feels a bit overwhelming,
Yeah.
There are so many moving pieces. How do we keep track of everything and make sure that we're managing all of this complexity effectively?
I get it. It can feel like a lot to handle. One of the most effective approaches is to create what we call a center of excellence for AI objectives. This is a dedicated team, or maybe even a whole department, that's responsible for making sure the framework gets implemented and used correctly across the entire company.
So it's like mission control for AI, making sure that everything runs smoothly and that everyone is on the same page.
That's a great way to put it. This team develops the templates, the processes, and the training materials. They provide guidance and support to the individual project teams. They keep track of the overall progress, measure results, and they're constantly looking for ways to improve the framework based on what they're learning.
Having that centralized team seems like it would really bring a lot of consistency and accountability to all your AI efforts. But what about companies that already have their own established ways of doing things, their own processes? How do they fit this framework into what they're already doing without disrupting everything?
You don't have to throw everything out and start over. One of the best ways to approach this is to integrate the objectives framework into your existing planning process. It's about evolution, not revolution.
So it's not a separate parallel track.
Yeah.
We're weaving it into the fabric of how the company already works.
Right. That might mean including discussions about AI objectives in your strategic planning meetings, your budget meetings, performance reviews, or even in the way you manage individual projects. It's about making it a natural part of how you do business.
Okay, so we're making it part of the company's DNA. What else can we do to make this framework feel less daunting and more user-friendly?
Having that common language and those standardized templates that we talked about earlier for defining and tracking objectives can make a huge difference. If everyone is speaking the same language and using the same tools, communication and collaboration are going to be a lot smoother. And I can't stress this enough, you really need strong leadership support. This can't just be something that's happening from the bottom up. Your senior leaders need to be the champions of this framework. They need to provide the resources and hold everyone accountable.
So it's top down and bottom up. Everyone needs to be on board and working together if this is going to work.
Exactly. When you have that alignment from top to bottom, plus a clear framework, a dedicated team, integrated processes, and a shared language, you've got a really good chance of achieving real success with AI.
Okay, I'm starting to get the big picture here, and I can see how this framework can help companies achieve those ambitious AI goals that they're striving for. But how do you know if all of this effort is actually paying off?
Mm.
How do you measure the success of the framework itself, not just individual projects?
That's the million-dollar question. It's easy to focus on the progress of individual projects, but you also need to step back and look at the bigger picture. How is this framework affecting the organization as a whole?
Give us the key metrics. What are the signs that this framework is actually working?
One of the most important things to look at is the level of collaboration between your technical teams and your business teams. Are they actually working together well? Do they understand each other's goals and priorities? Are they collaborating through the entire life cycle of an AI project, from defining the problem to implementing the solution and then evaluating the results?
So we want to make sure that we've broken down those silos and created a truly integrated approach to AI. No more bridges that don't meet in the middle.
Exactly. Another key indicator is the quality of the decisions that are being made about AI. Are those decisions aligned with the overall business strategy? Are they based on data and solid reasoning, or are we just chasing the latest shiny object and following the hype?
We want to make sure that we're being strategic about our AI investments, not just reacting to the latest trends or letting our emotions guide our decisions.
Right. You also need to assess how confident people feel about investing in AI. Do the stakeholders, including your leadership team, believe that you can deliver on your AI promises? Are they willing to continue putting resources behind these initiatives?
Because if they don't believe that it's going to work, it's going to be really hard to get the resources and the support that you need to make it happen.
You got it. And this is a big one that a lot of companies miss. How engaged are your AI experts? Do they feel valued? Are they being challenged? Are they excited about their work? And even more importantly, are you able to attract and retain the top talent in a field that's super competitive?
Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good your framework is if you don't have the right people to make it work.
So true. And finally, and this is a really important one, are you seeing an improvement in your overall competitive position because of your AI efforts? Are you becoming a leader in your industry when it comes to AI capabilities and innovation? Are you using AI to gain a real competitive edge?
So it's not just about keeping up with the competition. It's about using AI to become a leader, a true innovator in your field.
Absolutely. If you're seeing positive trends in all of those areas, collaboration, decision-making, investment confidence, talent engagement, and a stronger competitive position, that's a really good sign that your AI objectives framework is working.
I love having these really clear benchmarks. It makes it so much easier to track progress and see if we're on the right track. But I'm a big believer in the power of stories. Can you share an example of a company that's actually used this framework and seen amazing results? A real-world case study would really bring this to life.
You bet. There's a great case study about a global pharmaceutical company that was really struggling to see any return on their AI investments. Does that sound familiar?
It does, unfortunately. I've seen that happen in so many companies. They invest all of this money in the latest technology. They hire all of these brilliant people, but they're stuck in this endless cycle of pilot projects that never seem to go anywhere. They never reach those big AI dreams.
And that was exactly this company's situation. They had everything going for them. Smart people, cutting-edge technology, tons of data, but they were just caught in that cycle of failed projects. So they decided to do something drastic, and they decided to implement this strategic AI objectives framework.
So they went all in. They committed to doing things differently. What happened? Where did they start?
They started by taking a really hard look at all of their existing AI projects, and they didn't hold back. They held those projects up against their strategic priorities and made some tough decisions about which ones to keep and which ones to let go.
So they went back to that first phase that we talked about, assessment and reset.
Yeah.
Taking an honest look at what was working and what wasn't, and making those tough decisions, even if it meant letting go of projects that people were emotionally attached to.
Exactly. They weren't afraid to make some big changes. In the end, they canceled 11 projects, they completely changed the focus of 8 other projects, and they only kept 7 projects moving forward without any changes.
Wow, that is serious commitment. They must have been really determined to get this right. What about the projects that they decided to keep? How did they approach those differently?
For the projects that made the cut, they focused on getting really, really clear about the problem they were trying to solve. They created those cross-functional teams with both technical people and business people, and they worked together to understand the challenge from every possible angle.
So they were serious about breaking down those silos right from the start. No more ivory towers for the data scientists.
Nope. And to make sure they were measuring success in the right way, they created a whole set of metrics for each project. And these metrics included specific business goals, technical performance goals, and targets for how many people were actually using the AI system.
They weren't leaving anything to chance. They made sure they had a really clear picture of what success looked like for each project and how they were going to measure their progress. But what about that all-important return on investment? How did they track that?
They implemented a standard method for calculating ROI across all of their AI projects, so everything was being measured in the same way. They even assigned people specifically to track the results and make sure they could prove that these AI investments were actually making a financial difference.
They were putting their money where their mouth was. They wanted to be able to show with hard numbers that AI wasn't just some fun experiment, it was a real way to make the business more successful.
Right.
And how did they handle the accountability piece? Were specific people being held responsible for the outcomes?
Absolutely. They changed the structure of their AI teams so that both the technical people and the business people on a project reported to the same project leader. And to make sure that everyone's incentives were aligned, they tied team bonuses to those business outcomes, not just to completing the technical tasks.
So it wasn't just about building the AI system, it was about making sure the AI system actually delivered results for the business. That's a huge shift in mindset. And the big question, did it work? Did they actually see any improvement?
The results were amazing. Within just 18 months, they had documented $157 million in value that they could directly link to their AI projects. And before they started using this framework, they were seeing practically zero measurable results from their AI investments.
That is incredible. They totally turned things around. So this framework really did work for them. It wasn't just some theory. It actually helped them achieve real measurable results with AI. What about their success rate for individual projects? Did they see improvements there as well?
Definitely. The number of projects that achieved their business objectives went from a measly 20% to a whopping 73%.
That's a huge jump. It sounds like they finally figured out how to make AI work for them. What about the time it took to see results? Did that get any better?
You bet. The average time it took for an AI project to go from an idea to actually delivering measurable value for the business dropped from 14 months all the way down to just 5.3 months.
Wow. So they were delivering more successful projects, and they were seeing those results much faster. What was their secret?
I think one of the most powerful insights from this case study comes from a quote from the company's chief information officer. They said, "Technology was never the limiting factor. It was always about how clearly we defined what we were trying to achieve and how we were going to measure success."
That's a great point. It really gets to the heart of what this framework is all about. It's not about having the coolest AI technology. It's about knowing why you're using AI, what you're trying to achieve, and how you're going to know if you've been successful. And the Strategic AI Objectives Framework gives you the roadmap to do all of that.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This framework has the potential to totally change how companies approach AI. It shifts the focus from technology to business results, which is where it should be.
Okay, so we've seen that this framework can work, even for a large, complex organization like a global pharmaceutical company. But for the rest of us who aren't operating on that scale, let's break down how to actually get started with this. It all feels a bit overwhelming, to be honest.
It's totally understandable to feel that way. It's a journey, not a sprint. And like any journey, breaking it down into smaller steps can make it feel much more manageable. I like to think of it as a 3-phase process. And the first phase, which we call assessment and reset, is all about laying that strong foundation. And it usually takes about 60 days to do it right.
Okay, let's walk through those first 60 days. What are the key things we need to focus on?
The first thing you need to do is get real with yourself about where you stand with AI right now. Take a good, hard look at every single AI project that you have going on. Ask yourself, what are we actually doing? Why are we doing it? And what results are we seeing? This is the time for some serious honesty, no sugarcoating allowed.
So, It's like we're looking in the AI mirror and seeing our true reflection, warts and all. But once we have that honest assessment, what do we do with it?
You use that assessment to make some hard decisions about your AI portfolio. Which projects are really aligned with the things that matter most for your business, your strategic goals? Which projects are actually delivering value? And which projects are just sucking up resources without producing any real results? Be ready to make some cuts and refocus your energy on the things that are truly important.
It's like decluttering our AI closet, getting rid of the things that we don't wear anymore, and making space for the things that we actually love and use. It's about being ruthless with our priorities.
Exactly. But it's not all about getting rid of things. While you're doing this initial cleanup, you also want to look for those quick wins that we talked about earlier. Find a couple of projects that aren't too complex to implement, but that have a high chance of showing some positive results early on.
Ah, those quick wins. They're so important for boosting morale and showing everyone that this whole framework thing actually works. It's about building momentum before you dive into the more complicated stuff.
Right. And one more thing that's absolutely essential during these first 60 days, get your leadership team on board. Make sure they really understand what the framework is all about, why it's so important, and what kind of resources you're going to need to make it work.
Right. There's no point in charging ahead without getting buy-in from the people who control the budget. Those first 60 days sound like a busy time. Assessing, prioritizing, finding those quick wins, and getting everyone aligned. What happens after that?
The next phase, foundation building, takes another 60 days, and there are 4 key steps involved. First, you need to create a common language and a set of tools that everyone in the organization can use to define and track AI objectives. This means creating standardized templates, agreeing on clear processes, and using consistent terminology across the board. Basically, we want everyone speaking the same language when it comes to AI.
It's like we're creating a universal translator for AI. No more confusion or misunderstandings. That sounds like a great foundation to start building on. What else?
Next, we've got to tackle those silos that we talked about. This is where you actually change the structure of your teams to build in that cross-functional accountability that we talked about earlier. Make sure that every single AI project has a dedicated team with both technical experts and business people working side by side toward a common goal.
Back to that bridge analogy. We need both sides working together in sync from the very beginning if we want to build a bridge that actually connects.
Exactly. So you've got the framework, you've got the right teams in place. What comes next?
Well, if we're trying to be truly data-driven about all of this, I'm guessing we need a really good way to measure what's going on, see what's working.
You're absolutely right. The next step is to design your measurement system. This is where you figure out how you're going to consistently track the value and the impact of every single AI project that you take on.
So it's about creating dashboards and metrics that prove the ROI of your AI investments, right? No more fuzzy numbers. We want to see those hard results.
Exactly. And the final piece of this foundation is establishing a clear governance structure. This might involve creating an executive steering committee or some similar group that's responsible for overseeing all of the AI projects happening within the company. This group makes sure that resources are being allocated effectively and that everyone is following the framework.
It sounds like they're kind of like the quality control team, making sure that everything is built to code and that no corners are being cut. That feels like a really solid foundation for building on. So we've assessed our current AI landscape. We've gotten rid of what wasn't working. We've built a strong foundation. What does it look like to actually scale up our AI efforts from here?
That's where we move into the scaling and refinement phase. And this is where you take everything that you've learned so far, all the progress that you've made, and you start applying it to all of your new AI projects. AI becomes just a normal part of how your business operates.
It's like we're going from building those little model airplanes to building a full-blown passenger jet. But hopefully, we're doing it responsibly. What does responsible scaling look like in the world of AI?
You're right. It has to be done responsibly. And in this phase, which usually takes about 6 to 12 months, you're really focused on building a learning system around your AI. This means you've got to create ways to gather feedback from all of your users, your stakeholders, and even from watching what's happening out in the market. What are the trends? What are the changes that are happening? You take all of that information, all of that data, you analyze it to find patterns, identify areas where things can be improved, and you use those insights to fine-tune your AI systems and make them even better.
So we're not just building AI systems, we're building this learning machine that's constantly evolving and improving those AI systems over time. It's about being flexible, being able to adapt, and constantly iterating based on what's happening in the real world.
That's it, exactly. And a big part of this is creating what we call an adjustment framework. This is basically a set of guidelines and criteria that you can use to help you make smart decisions about when and how to change your AI projects as you learn more about what's working and what's not.
So it's not about reacting to every little problem that pops up. It's
Yep.
about having this structured, strategic way to evaluate the situation and make those adjustments over time.
You got it. That might mean changing the scope of a project, moving resources around, adjusting the timeline, or even redefining what success looks like based on what you learn.
Being flexible and being willing to adapt is so important. And all of this learning that's happening is great. But if it just stays within the team that's working on that specific project, it's not really helping the rest of the organization, right?
You're 100% right, and that's why knowledge transfer is so important during the scaling phase. It's not enough for individual teams to learn from their own experiences. You have to make sure that those lessons learned are shared with the entire organization so that everyone can benefit.
Knowledge is power, but sharing that knowledge is how you really create lasting change. How do we make sure that knowledge transfer is actually happening effectively within the organization?
There are a few key things that you can do. First, make sure you are documenting everything. Capture all of the lessons learned from your AI projects, both big and small, and create a central place where everyone can access that information. Second, create opportunities for people to connect and share their experiences with each other. Communities of practice where people can swap stories and advice are super valuable for this. And finally, develop training programs that can help people learn from each other's successes and mistakes. These programs can help everyone in the organization get better at working with AI.
So we're basically creating a company-wide brain trust for AI. I love that.
That's the idea. When you combine all of these elements, a clear framework, dedicated teams, integrated processes, a common language, and support from the top, you are creating an organization that's truly capable of harnessing the power of AI in a way that's both effective and responsible.
It's all starting to come together now. But I'll be honest, it still feels like a lot to manage. There's so many moving pieces. What are some tips for managing all of this complexity and making sure that everything runs smoothly?
It's true, there are a lot of moving parts, but there are definitely ways to make it more manageable. One of the best approaches that I've seen is to create what we call a center of excellence for AI objectives. Think of this as a dedicated team or even a whole department that's focused on making sure the framework is being used effectively across the entire organization.
So it's like mission control for AI, making sure everything runs smoothly and that everyone is on the same page.
Exactly. This team would be in charge of developing the templates, the processes, the training materials, all of the nuts and bolts. They provide support and guidance to the individual teams that are working on AI projects. They keep track of the overall progress of the organization's AI efforts. They measure results, and they're constantly looking for ways to improve the framework itself based on what they're learning.
Having that centralized team seems like it would really bring a lot of consistency and accountability to a company's AI efforts. But what about companies that already have their own well-established processes and ways of doing things? How do you integrate this framework into what they're already doing without turning their world upside down?
You don't have to start from scratch or completely overhaul everything. One of the most effective strategies is to find ways to incorporate the objectives framework into the planning processes that you already have in place. Think of it as evolution, not revolution.
So we're not creating a whole separate thing that runs parallel to everything else. We're finding ways to weave this framework into the fabric of how the company already works.
Right. This might mean bringing AI objectives into the conversations you're already having about strategic planning, budget allocation, performance reviews, or even how you manage projects. It's about making it a natural part of how you do business, not some separate thing that people have to think about.
That feels much less disruptive.
Yeah.
Are there any other tips for making this framework easier to adopt and use within an organization?
Having that common language and a set of standardized templates that we talked about earlier can really make a big difference. If everyone is speaking the same language and using the same tools, it makes communication and collaboration so much easier. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have strong support from your leadership team. This can't just be a grassroots effort. You need your senior leaders to be champions of this framework. They need to be providing the resources, and they need to hold people accountable for making it work.
So it has to be top down and bottom up. Everyone needs to be on board if this is going to work.
Absolutely. When you have that alignment across the organization, plus a clear framework, a dedicated team, integrated processes, and a shared language, you have a really strong foundation for achieving real success with AI.
Okay.
This is starting to make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But even with all of these things in place, how do you actually know if it's working? How do you measure the success of the framework itself, not just the individual AI projects?
That's a great question. It's easy to get caught up in tracking the progress of all of your individual AI projects, but it's also important to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. How is this framework impacting the organization as a whole? What are the systemic changes that are happening because of this framework?
So give us the KPIs, the metrics. What are the signs that this framework is actually doing what it's supposed to do?
One of the most important things to look at is the level of collaboration between your technical teams and your business teams. Are they working together well? Do they understand each other's goals and priorities? Are they really collaborating at every stage of the AI project lifecycle, from defining the problem to implementing the solution and then evaluating the results?
So we're looking for real integration here, right?
hmm
No more working in silos. We want to see those bridges connecting the technical world and the business world.
Exactly. Another thing to look at is the quality of the decisions that are being made about AI within the organization. Are those decisions aligned with your overall business strategy? Are they data-driven? Are they based on sound reasoning? Or are we still getting caught up in the hype and chasing the latest shiny object?
We want to make sure that we're being strategic about our AI investments and not just reacting to the latest trend or letting our emotions drive our decisions.
That's right. And you also need to think about how confident people feel about investing in AI. Do your stakeholders, including your senior leadership, believe that you can actually deliver on your AI promises? Are they willing to continue investing resources in these initiatives?
Because without that trust and belief that it's going to work, it's going to be really hard to get the resources and the support that you need to make these things happen.
Exactly. And this is a really important one that a lot of companies miss. How engaged are your AI experts? Do they feel valued? Are they being challenged? Are they excited about the work that they're doing? And even more importantly, are you able to attract and retain the best and brightest minds in a field that's super competitive right now?
Because at the end of the day, even with the most brilliant framework, if you don't have the right people who are passionate and knowledgeable about AI, it's not going to work.
So true. And finally, maybe the most important metric of all, how is all of this effort affecting your competitive position? Are you becoming a leader in your industry when it comes to AI capabilities and innovation? Are you using AI to gain a real competitive advantage?
So it's not just about keeping up with the competition. It's about using AI to leapfrog ahead of the competition. It's about becoming a leader in your space.
You got it. And if you're seeing positive trends across all, you got it. And if you're seeing positive trends across all of those areas of the collaboration, the decision-making, the confidence in your AI investments, how engaged your people are, and a stronger competitive position for the company, it's a pretty good indication that your AI objectives framework is actually working.
I like having those clear signs to look for. It makes it so much easier to track progress and see if we're moving in the right direction. But I'm also a big believer in the power of real-world examples.
Yeah.
Can you give us a story about a company that actually put this framework into practice and saw some amazing results? A case study would really help to bring all of this to life.
Absolutely. There's a really interesting case study about a global pharmaceutical company that was at first having a lot of trouble getting any real value out of their AI projects. I mean, they had everything you could ask for, brilliant people, cutting edge technology, mountains of data, but they just couldn't seem to escape this cycle of failed projects and wasted potential. Sound familiar?
It does, unfortunately. It's a story I've heard so many times. Companies invest a ton of money in AI, they bring in all of this amazing talent, but then they get stuck in this endless loop of pilot projects that never really go anywhere. They never actually reach those big AI dreams.
And that's exactly where this company was. So they decided to make a big change and implement this strategic AI objectives framework.
So they decided to do things differently, to commit to this new way of working.
Yeah.
What happened? Where did they start?
The first thing they did was take a really hard look at all of their AI projects, and they didn't hold back. They compared each project to their overall strategic priorities, and they made some tough decisions about which projects to keep and which ones to just let go of.
So it's back to that assessment and reset phase that we talked about earlier, right?
Yeah.
No sacred cows. They're willing to look at everything with fresh eyes and make those difficult choices.
Exactly. And they weren't messing around. They ended up completely canceling 11 projects. They significantly changed the focus of 8 other projects, and they only kept 7 projects moving forward the way they were.
Wow, that's some serious commitment. It sounds like they were determined to make this work. So what about the projects that survived the cut?
How did they change their approach to those projects?
For those projects that made the cut, they really focused on getting crystal clear about the problem they were trying to solve. They put together these cross-functional teams with both technical people and business people, and they worked together to analyze the challenge from every angle, making sure that everyone was on the same page about what they were trying to achieve.
So they were serious about breaking down those silos and making sure that everyone was working together right from the start. No more letting the data scientists hide away in their ivory tower.
Exactly. And then they went a step further and defined a whole set of metrics for each project to make sure they were measuring success in a meaningful way. These metrics included things like specific business goals, technical performance targets, and even goals for how many people were actually using the AI system.
So they were leaving nothing to chance. They were being really intentional about defining what success looked like and how they were going to measure it. What about that all-important ROI? How did they make sure they were actually getting a return on their AI investments?
They created a standard way of calculating ROI for all of their AI projects so that everything was being measured using the same yardstick.
Yep.
They even dedicated specific people to tracking results and making sure they could prove that their AI investments were actually leading to real financial gains.
So they weren't just talking about ROI, they were actually measuring it and proving it with real data.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And what about the accountability piece? Were they holding people responsible for delivering on those results?
Oh yeah, definitely. They restructured their teams so that both the technical experts and the business people on a project reported to the same leader. And to make sure that everyone's incentives were aligned, they tied team bonuses to those business outcomes, not just to finishing the technical tasks. So it wasn't just about building the cool AI system anymore. It was about making sure that AI system actually delivered results for the business.
Yeah.
And the big question, did it actually work? Did all this effort pay off?
The results were pretty amazing. Within 18 months, they had documented $157 million in value that they could directly trace back to their AI projects. And before they started using this framework, they were seeing practically no measurable return on their AI investments.
That's a huge turnaround.
Hmm.
So this framework wasn't just some theory. It really helped them unlock the potential of AI and get some serious results. What about their success rate for individual projects? Did that improve too?
Oh, it definitely did. The number of projects that actually achieved their business goals jumped from a really disappointing 20% to a very impressive 73%.
That's a huge improvement. It sounds like they finally cracked the code and figured out how to make AI work for them.
What about the time it took to actually see those results? Did they see any improvement there? Absolutely. The average time it took for one of their AI projects to go from an idea to actually delivering measurable value for the business went from 14 months all the way down to just 5.3 months.
That's a game changer. So they weren't just delivering more successful projects, they were also delivering those successes much faster. What was the key to their success? What was the biggest lesson they learned?
I think one of the most important takeaways from this case study is a quote from the company's chief information officer. They said, "The technology itself was never the problem. The real challenge was always having a clear understanding of what we were trying to accomplish and how we were going to measure success."
That's a brilliant insight. It really gets to the heart of what this framework is all about. It's not about having the flashiest AI technology. It's about knowing exactly what you're hoping to achieve with AI, how you'll know if you've been successful, and having a clear plan to get there. And the Strategic AI Objectives Framework provides that plan.
I couldn't agree more. This framework really has the potential to transform how companies approach AI. It shifts the focus away from just the technology and puts it where it belongs, on the business outcomes. And that's how you create real, lasting success.
It's been amazing to dive into this topic with you today. I think we've uncovered some really important insights that can help companies avoid some of those common pitfalls and finally start achieving those amazing results that we keep hearing about.
I've had a great time.
So for our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of AI. We hope you found it helpful, maybe even a little bit inspiring.
And if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by all of this, remember, the Strategic AI Objectives Framework is there to guide you. It gives you a roadmap, a clear path forward.
It's like having a personal AI Sherpa guiding you through the challenges of making AI work for your business. And remember, even though there will be challenges, it can be fun too.
Absolutely. Have fun with it.
So, to our amazing listeners, thank you for being here. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the world of technology and innovation. Until then, stay curious.